The Brutalist Playground is an interactive and conceptual installation. It explores the abstract play spaces that were devised as part of post-war housing estates by recreating these visual elements within the gallery space. We're working with Assemble and artist Simon Terrell. They are used in the archive as a creative tool to reconstruct and reimagine these play structures.
What really drew our attention to these play spaces was a completely different criteria of public space that they show before the time of liability and risk in the ways that we understand that now. It's the psychology of space that I find really interesting. The architecture of different spaces induce a different inhabitation. Privatised, very highly controlled semi-public space, very different thing to an uncontrolled open access area. These playgrounds, they're such a wild, strange gesture that these architects made. And I think that speaks to something about that optimism, that time of the welfare state. There were big ideas then about remaking the world anew.
A lot of the things that we're recreating aren't obvious. They're these very unusual forms, almost like a condensed brutalism. And I think that's what's really cool, that it's free architecture without constraints. So I think you see the fun that the architect's having making these amazing structures.
It's very, very hard to design for play because play is actually an incredibly complex set of behaviours that is determined by the child. When you look back to some of those brutalist playgrounds, what you see is a sign that you're allowed to interact with this environment a bit differently, that the normal rules are suspended, that you don't have to rush through it, that it's a place that you can maybe co-opt to your own ends. The power in its ambiguity is it takes itself out of the logic that maybe dominates most of the other built spaces in the city.
Brutalism is associated with bush-hammered concrete, which is very hard and sharp. And playground, I think, in today's eyes, is something that's very soft and safe. These concrete playscapes that we're looking at in this exhibition pose massive risks. Risk is something that should be thought about rather than something that should be avoided entirely.
There was something quite perverse about recreating these concrete structures in something that was the complete antithesis and was the ultimate in soft play. The structures themselves have posed a challenge. How do we take these objects and be faithful to their scale and make them at one-to-one within the gallery space constraints? What's exciting is that not only is it going to be about how do you play on these structures and how should they be used, but the moments where they intersect with the gallery.
It opens itself up, something between an architectural object, a sculpture, and a theatre set.
Looking through the RIBA's archive and finding these forgotten, a lot of them now demolished brutalist play spaces, and recreating them at one-to-one in the gallery environment, celebrating their surreal nature. These things are great and shouldn't be forgotten.